In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how we can set up our character to be affected by physics and force. So we're going to get into rigid bodies and some colliders here. So this is going to really set you up to understand how you can apply weight and how you can apply force to a character and how they can interact with other objects. So let's get started in here. So if you remember in the previous lesson, I'm just going to switch over to my scene view. There we go, we got our character all framed up nicely. So I'm going to click on this WrapTuck character. This is that empty game object that we created to control all the movement to our character. Now remember, I wanted to have this sprite object here just to focus on animation and your player's appearance, basically. So let's click on our WrapTuck character. Now this is all for movement. So how can we apply weight to our character? We can apply weight to any game object, really, just by using the component RigidBodies. So I'm going to click on here, Add Component. I'm going to go Physics 2D, and I'm going to say Rigid Body 2D. Now, why are we not using a rigid body just standard? If we were to search in here, we could go Rigid Body. You can see we have Rigid Body and Rigid Body 2D. This is a 2D game, so we're not going to be applying force in the Z or Z axis. So we are only going to be using the X and the Y, which if we use a rigid body 2D game object, that's all it calculates for, and we're going to be saving your computer's resources, and it just makes things less complicated, really, because we don't want to have that extra layer of control that we're not going to use. That's just going to get in the way. So let's think about that. That's going to be a rigid body 2D, X and Y. Let's apply this. And when we apply this property to our game object, we can see all the properties that this gives us, all the options here. So the rigid body is strictly for gravity and weight. So I'm going to pretty much be happy with these defaults here. The mass, which is your weight, is going to be set to 1. That's perfect. We can leave it at default for now. Linear drag is kind of resistance in movement, being affected by force. If you want this to be like a really heavier object, you might want to apply some more drag or some less drag to change it. If it's a slippery surface, it just really affects the movement. Angular drag would be resistance in the rotation aspect of your game object. We don't need to be worrying about that, as this will not be rotating. Now, fixed angle, I'm going to check this. What that's going to do is that's going to lock our rotation from being, from our character from toppling over if it's affected by force. We're going to be changing how he's interacting. We're just going to create a box around him. So if you can visualize a box around our character, and if force was applied, that box could topple on over and our character would be doing like a belly slide across the ground. We don't want that. We want him to be standing upright straight, and we want him to be marching along. So I do not want force to knock him over. So let's check fixed angle. It'll lock all rotations. Perfect. Is kinematic? I'm going to leave that unchecked. Is kinematic, when that's checked, it's going to stop force from affecting your object. So if we had a bunch of wind or we had a bunch of objects that are sliding into this character and is kinematic is on, it's not going to move, but it's still going to act as a collision device. So things can collide into it, but it's going to be locked in place. We don't want that. We want to apply force and have him sliding. So let's uncheck this. Next, we have interpolate. Right now it's set to none. I'm going to set it to interpolate. What that's going to do is that's just going to smooth out his movement. It's going to base the physics off the previous frame of physics-based movement, which will always give us a nice calculation from frame to frame. So that's perfect. And the rest we do not need to worry about. We have him all set up. Now we have some weight to our character. And what comes next in physics is, well, how big is this character? What is his boundaries? Let's set that up right now. So how can we say, obviously we can visually see this is his arm, this is his body. If something hits this, how does Unity know that that is the border of our character? So let's set that up now. Add component. Let's X out of that searching there. Let's go to Physics 2D, and let's go to a box collider 2D. We could use a circle, we could use edge, we could use polygon, and all this different stuff, but a box is simple. It has 4 points, and it's going to cover our character nicely. See if his arm is a little bit overextended there, it's out of the box. That's cool, that doesn't matter. For this, we just want his main body to be in this cube. So if anything hits this cube, then Unity knows that's our character. So let's set up the boundaries here. Let's hit our size. Let's stretch that up, our position. And let's move it over a little bit. His arms can extend, that's cool with me. His X, scale that down a little bit. Okay, And let's do the size up. Let's see what 90 does. That's looking pretty good. And the Y could be a little bit more. Wow, that actually fits perfectly. Look at that. We have our boundaries of our character now. This box collider object, basically if this character walks into anything, it knows, oh, you've hit our player, so stop. Or if something hits this, it says, oh, you've hit the player, what should we do? So this really just tells Unity the boundaries of our character. Box collider, we can collide with objects now. And the only really other option you have other than moving and changing the size of this is the trigger. We don't want that for this object specifically, but we are going to use a lot of triggers because what's going to happen is even though you have this collider on, you can walk through the object, but it's going to say you've walked through. It's going to detect that you've actually walked through. You've contacted this. You have had a collision with this. It's going to give us that option to say, now we can do something. If this player was to walk through this invisible barrier, say a checkpoint, it won't stop your character. You can walk on through it, but you can trigger a function to happen now, or like wake up a boss or something like that. So that's really cool to have. But for now, let's uncheck this. All right, let's zoom out and see our character in our level. So right now we have our character, he has weight and he has boundaries. He has size and shape now. That's it. We have our physics set up for our character. So let's just see what happens here. I'm just going to save and I'm going to hit play on our game and we're going to see what happens when there's physics on our character. So watch this. Oh, where'd he go? He just falls right on through. Well, what's happening here? When I click this, he has weight, he has collisions, but he just falls on through. And the reason for that is nothing else has collisions. Nothing else here has weight. All we have is art and visual. So what are we going to do about that? We're just going to apply a ground collider to this level, and we can apply some boundaries for the in and the out of our level as well. So let's go ahead and do that. And now our character will be able to say, oh, look at this, I can collide with a floor, or I can collide with a wall now. So let's set up the boundaries for the rest of everything. So let's go in here, let's go to our environment background main, and let's apply some colliders here. Let's go component. Let's just say box collider 2D as well. And let's move this over. Let's scale it in the x-axis. Obviously not that thin, but as thin as you pretty much can. And let's move this over all the way to the edge of our level. And let's go ahead and add another one. Why not? Box collider 2D. What did I say? Scale 0.18. Let's do one more like that. Scale 0.18. And let's move him over as well. Let's go to the end of our level. Position him over here. All right, and now we need to add our floor. Of course, very important. So let's go and add one more collider. Look at this. Just colliding all over the place here. Box collider 2D. Let's go down and let's move this center Y, and we can scale this all the way down as well. Okay, and let's position him up to where just below our character's feet. Let's get on in there. And let's move this up. Center Y, let's go. Okay, I'm gonna have to get serious here. 3.22. That actually is probably gonna be perfect. Let's give it, for safety, a little bit more space. And let's see our character. Oh, perfect. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna bring this up. 22. Beautiful. Okay, so let's get out of here. And let's see what we got. We have our colliders. See, we have our ground colliders and our left and right in and out of our level colliders. Cool. So now let's hit play and see what happens. Hey, see, our character now has a ground surface to collide with. That's perfect. So now, one thing I want to say is we're going to be testing our game quite a bit now. So what you're going to notice is you can go ahead and you can make all these changes to your game when you're playing it. You can say, oh, let's change our speed of our force. Let's change, is this a trigger? Is this not a trigger? Any change you make while this is checked, while you're in game testing mode, it's not going to be saved after you come out of it. So you may be confused. You could spend like 20 minutes in here tweaking all your variables, all your settings, say, yeah, it's perfect. As soon as you uncheck this, it's going to all reset back to what it was, which is actually a really great feature as long as you know about it. So what you want to do is when you're testing all your settings, you can do all your stuff. Just make sure to take a note of it. So when you hit stop and you're back out of gameplay mode, you can just go and set all those levels after you've tested them already. And really, really important tip to know. So let's just prove that right now. So box collider, this I believe here is our ground. Let's just set it to trigger. Perfect. So now he has fallen right through because it's still there. It's still going to collide with our character. It's not acting as a box collider. So let me check that again. Or actually, I'm going to leave that checked. I'm going to unplay our game. And now it's back to what it used to be. All right, so WrapTuck, he's all ready to rock now. He's got some weight to him, he's got some size, we have a floor, we have some walls for him to bash into. We're pretty much good here. Now we just need to get into how we can control the force to actually move him around. But here we are at a great point. I really hope you've learned a lot about getting your artwork into the game, setting up your characters, and now let's jump right on into some scripting. It's going to be a lot of fun seeing this thing come together, so I'll see you in the next lesson.